Welcome to Child of the Redwoods Live. We are two former public school teachers who chose to homeschool our own children, and we're going to share our views on education. We're going to talk about parenting. We're going to talk about Montessori. We'll give you insight into our real lives. Kind of scary, but it's going to happen. And we'll talk about love because that's what Montessori is all about. And that's what you need a whole lot of in order to homeschool your children.
That's right.
And you have plenty of it, I promise. Good. Hi, Joanna. Nice to see you. Hi, Amanda, Angela. Great. This is Cho Chang. I'm so glad you guys are here. So yeah, this is going to be kind of informal like that. I know that some of you know who I am already, but for those of you who don't, I'm Aubrey. You might know me from the Child of the Redwoods podcast or our Instagram account at Child of the Redwoods. I have been a Montessori advocate for my entire life. So I've kind of been around the Montessori block online really since for the last 10 years or so. Yeah, since our kids were little. And I just can't stop talking about it. So this is our latest venture.
That's right.
This is David.
I'm David, and I'm the other one in the frame for you. We're really excited to have this opportunity to speak with our members, new or old, and just really talk about something that we're very passionate about, which is education. We're really here to try and help you decide what kind of an education to give your own children, and whether you homeschool full time or not. We actually just believe that education is a journey you take with your children, and the opportunities for learning start
over every day.
That's exactly right.
Literally.
So we're not here to advocate necessarily for one point of view or the other. We just really are here to advocate for why education is important and how we as parents, the role we play in helping guide that along. And in fact, today we're going to talk a little bit about the number one reason parents choose to homeschool. But first, just a few updates on what's happening at Child of the Redwoods.
Okay, so this is what's going on at our house and in our lives and in our business. So our primary course is starting again. I know some of you may have taken that already, but if you haven't, it's an opportunity for you to learn Montessori with me. I feel like there's so much in the Montessori community. Like you can't learn everything from one teacher. But I really love teaching Montessori online, and this is a course for children who are about ages 2 to 6. So if you have a child who is 2, that's like the right on beginning age for the primary program. So the details are the program starts. It's like a little intensive course that we take over 8 weeks, but you get lifetime access to the core content. So the live portion of the course starts on March 7th. So that is coming up soon. So if you already took that course and you loved it, this is a great time to share that enrollment link with your friends because enrollment ends on March 6th. So that's the day before class. And I love to have everybody inside the classroom before we start teaching. So that'll be fun. So that's something that you can go to our website to learn more about if you're interested in that program in particular. And our website is
childoftheredwoods.com.
Pretty easy. Yeah.
We're also really excited about the upcoming month in Constellation, which is our monthly curriculum program. We're doing drum, so drums as in drum, as well as eardrum. So we're doing things around the ear, parts of the ear. We just built some 4-part cards around parts of the ear that'll be included. We did drums around the world as a printable that's included. Another great recipe, I think it's a yogurt with vegetable drumsticks. So there's some real fun stuff. And of course, that also that's going to be out in March. You also, if you're a member of Constellation, you'll get 2 coaching sessions that month, as you do every month, plus the community. And I didn't bring a printout of the stuff to show you, so you just have to imagine it. But it's pretty nice. We're excited about how the Constellation themes have been rolling out this year.
Yeah, and for full transparency, these are things that we create ourselves with our team. We kind of go through there's a long period of like brainstorming and coming up with the ideas, sourcing, different images and things that we might be able to pull together to make really cool printables. Our goal with Constellation is to create printables for you that are really high quality that you would find in the Montessori classroom, but that are easy enough and curated in a way so the parents can easily implement it at home. So we love doing it. Yeah. So I kind of handle more of the brainstorming and the kind of the developmental editing process. Carrie does a lot of our writing. She's our assistant. And David, then we kind of turn it over to David and he creates those beautiful materials for you. So so we roll out a theme every single month. So you get access to all of the themes for the last, is it 15 months?
Well, you get
everything
since January 2021. And if you sign up today, you get all that plus the 2 months that have already published, plus March through next February. So it's a good program. It's thematic. It helps you sort of kind of keep going. We do offer it for ages 2 to 9. So somebody asked about upper elementary. We're not quite at upper elementary yet. We're the lower elementary is still one of our new rollouts, and we want to really kind of make sure we get that synced. But if you do have a child who's in the lower age range, would be 6 to 9, you'll find ways to adapt or to use those materials in Constellation for that. Or if you have a 4-year-old and an 8-year-old, we've designed them in a way that you can sort of customize the experience and do a little bit more for one age group and a little bit less for the other, depending on their stage of readiness.
Yeah. So our goal was to create a program that works for families, because we know a lot of you might have have a baby, have a toddler, have a preschooler, and a child in lower elementary. And if you don't know, you might in a few years have a child who is in the elementary years. And that way, whether your child goes on to go to a school or just stays at home, it can be a program that just grows with the family. So that's exciting. And then speaking of elementary, we don't have upper elementary yet. That would be for the ages of like 9 to 12. But we do have a really strong program for ages 6 to 9. And I say 6 to 9 loosely because we have an 11-year-old at home who's obviously still working through a lot of the concepts that we have going on in our lower elementary program. And that's because when Montessori created the elementary curriculum, really it was to span the whole second plane years. So we're talking about ages 6 to 12 for the second plane. And we do that by kind of creating the curriculum around it. And then we start in lower elementary, introducing the ideas. And then in the upper elementary years, we just keep getting deeper and deeper and deeper.
That's right.
Enrollment is closed right now for our lower elementary program. It will open up
May 30th.
May 30th.
Yeah, Memorial Day. Here in the US, it's Memorial Day. So, and then we'll be enrolling through the summer for the fall, and it's a full year program. So if you've taken primary, it's with that program, it's you get a lifetime access, but it's an 8-week intensive. But with lower elementary, because of the amount of content and just the way we wanted to support you, it's actually a full year. You get 9 months of coaching and 12 months of community access. So keep your eye on that. If you're interested, we'll talk about that more as we get closer to it. And I saw some of you folks are actually in the lower elementary program, and that's really thank you for joining us. So it's exciting, creating this experience together has been a real journey. It's just another dimension of our life together. We've been married for over 20 years. We have children together, and now we own a company together around a shared passion for education and empowerment and the power of education.
Yeah. And David, for the record, David and I have always had conversations like the ones that we're hoping to have with you today and for the future shows. We are just kind of nerds that way. We like to sit around in the living room and talk about education, philosophy, and the method and which method is better. And we just really get into the weeds of it. So if you're here for that intellectual journey, I'm sure you'll find some interesting insights from David, especially if you're in courses with me and usually hear me talk about education. You're for sure going to hear things that maybe I don't agree with, or just things that maybe you haven't really explored before, because David has certain experiences that he can bring to the table too. So I think that kind of wraps up our updates. Those are the three main programs that we have at Child of the Redwoods. We also have a Loving Discipline course. So if you're struggling with discipline, you might go and check that out, but it's not a live program. It's a program that's self-paced. So anyway, you're welcome to look into that. Hi, Alexandra.
Thanks
Love
to all
seeing
and
you.
who are joining from
Yeah.
Canada. Some snow in Canada, and see. Not literally. It's sunny here in the Bay, but pretty chilly actually.
Yeah.
Um, no
Okay,
snow.
so what we want to do with you is we want to share. We're hoping in every show we'll get to share some of the real life homeschooling that we actually are doing with our kids right now. And to caveat that, our kids are older than maybe a lot of yours are. We have an 11-year-old and a 14-year-old. But I think by sharing some of our real life stories, I think you will get an idea for the kind of parenting that we have been doing all along. Because really, even though we have shifted as a family, as our children go through different developmental phases, our core approach to parenting and to homeschooling really has pretty much stayed the same. We've kind of developed these certain techniques that work for us, and they're still working for us, even though our kids are older. So
Yeah,
to
that's right.
start off, yeah. So last night was a heavy. We
Yeah.
talked to the kids about Ukraine, and just to say out into the world, our hearts are focused on sending as much peace and love as possible to everyone who's out there. I know it feels a little personal
Yeah,
to David too.
the last company I worked with, we had an office in Tallinn, Estonia. We actually have, I don't know if there's any on the live right now, but we actually have a number of members from Estonia, from Tallinn, and other parts of Estonia, as well as all over. We have members from all over the world. We're really very blessed in that way.
Latvia.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
So, and of course, as Montessorians, peace and peace education are central to our worldviews, as I think they are for probably everyone else on this call. So we do send out all of our love and hope for peace and better days ahead for all.
Unity,
Yeah.
all of it. And this is actually, Maria Montessori did not keep herself out of politics at all. She was very vocal about the events that were going on in the world and advocating for peace. And she believed that the way we teach children in those very early years can make a huge impact on the kind of adults that they do become and the kind of decisions that they will make as, not just world leaders, but voters, participants in adult society. So it is definitely a very Montessori way of life to talk about politics with your kids. We didn't obviously start talking about politics with our kids when they were toddlers. And when they were toddlers and very young preschoolers, we did shelter them a lot from the scarier things that were happening in the world. We, weren't ready for them. Not all children have that privilege, obviously, but ours did. And so we kept them, as in a safe and nurturing and loving environment that was as secure feeling as possible when they were little. But as they got older and older, we started to share more and more. And this probably started during the preschool years. And as they got to be around 4, 5, and 6, they're asking a lot of questions about the world around them, about fairness, about justice, or just visually seeing differences out there that they were curious about. And so these are all opportunities for you to explore with your children in conversation. And so we just started there while they were little, not shying away from difficult conversations, but really leaning into them with love. And yeah, so we just continue. So last night was, David has a history background as well, which is something that's awesome. I always have to look up things. History is not it's not my gift. But David usually starts off by kind of telling a story, which is also a very Montessori way of approaching education in those elementary years.
Right. So last night I wanted the boys to think about the big picture and how different perspectives on what's happening. Because it's only through that kind of openness and understanding, which we might call empathy, that I think we can really achieve the peace and prosperity that we all want as humans and deserve. So talk to them about sort of the history of that part of the world a little bit, kind of helping them sort of tie in things that we've talked about before. We've studied, let's say, the Roman Empire, and thinking about the word czar and from the word Caesar and that history and the rich history of that part of the world, and kind of getting to think through it, talking about the Cold War, talking about things that happened in our lifetime that ended, and then getting them to try and understand more about what's happening now. And the goal is, I mean, for me, the goal is to arm them with information that they can use to navigate the world. We cannot be there for every moment of their lives. In fact, we should not want to be there for every moment of their life. Our jobs as educators and as parents is to enable them to be able to navigate the world with honesty and dexterity, intelligence, empathy. And to do that, we have to teach. We have to teach them what we believe and help them make those conclusions themselves when they come upon it. So if they're in, our oldest is in a news class, for example. He takes a news class online as a part of his homeschooling journey. It was kind of the premise, like, did you talk about it in your news class today? What did you talk about? Do you have any questions? Because we want to make sure that he feels supported through that process. And, for our younger son, he's at a different stage of development, right? He's in a different plane of development, but still intensely curious and no different in that way. We want him to have a knowledge and understanding so that he can be a good global citizen. We want him to feel the kind of connectivity with all humans that Montessori really talked about, and that we believe. I mean, it's a core tenet of our faith and our ethos is peace. So it's difficult to have those conversations. You really do have to decide when is the right time for your family, but I would encourage you not to shy away from them. That it's actually better to teach them rather than let it come to them in some other way, because that's actually where I think we run into trouble. We find the same thing with the internet, right? You're better off trying to arm them with the power of knowledge, rather than trying to keep them completely cloistered away from it, because ultimately it'll fail, and then they may not be armed with the right mindset to be able to navigate through some very difficult things.
Yeah. So we did some things last night that are kind of typical for us. I want to talk about kind of how we had this conversation with our kids, because I know a lot of times you're thinking, okay, so this world event is happening. How do I actually bring this up with my kids? How does that actually work in real life? So I'll tell you, and this is kind of the raw and real part, which is also kind of scary for us. But so it was fish night. It's the night that we cook fish. We are part of a fish co-op. And so David had recently taken our youngest to his karate class. He came home, he brought the fish home with him, picked it up, brought it home. And then I'm usually the one who cooks the fish. So I have been in the kitchen, I've been doing the dishes and kind of bustling about. I had been working earlier in the day, but now I'm like totally into the house. My oldest son, our oldest son is in his room on his computer. So then, I'm preparing the ingredients and I'm in the kitchen and out of the kitchen. And then David comes in the kitchen and says, "Oh, I just read this new piece of news, extra news about Ukraine." And I said, is it time to talk to the kids about it? And he said, "Yeah, I think we need to." So we called a family meeting and we said, "Hey, everybody needs to come to the couch. We've got some things to share with you." And so our oldest, typical teenager on his computer, and he's like, "Oh, doing my own thing." And I'm like, "No, this is important. You need to come. It's family time. We've got a conversation to have." So he comes to the couch and sits down. Our youngest goes and gets changed out of his outfit. I kind of tone down what I'm doing in the kitchen and I join on the couch. And then we kind of sit there just on the couch, and David starts by, maybe I started by just telling the story. And we might have just started with something as simple as, "Do you know where Ukraine is?"
Yeah, do you know where on the map it is?
Do you know where Russia is? And
that's right.
Yeah, and that's something that you could do with a toddler as well. You don't have to go into all of the details and the scary nature of what we worry will happen in the world. A great way to just introduce is just to get that map on the wall and say, "Some interesting things are happening around the world. Let me show you where a country called Ukraine is. Let's go find it on the map." And you can go to the map and find it. And if you wanted to take this further, I would suggest, especially at those toddler and primary age, that your focus maybe not be so much on history. That's that's kind of an elementary way of approaching it. When we get to the elementary years, when your child is getting towards more 6 years old, that's when they really have the capacity to start making connections in history. But when they're little, you would need to keep your storytelling very, very simple. Some people are worried, this is very point blank. What is happening right now? We don't know what will happen, but let's learn about this culture and these people.
And to offer reassurance that we're not in danger, that where we are, that our family is safe, especially for younger children, along with that, because it can be, even with direct information, it can be unsettling, right? As it is for us as adults. So to kind of put it within those terms as well.
And obviously, I'm speaking from the perspective of a parent who lives in the United States, that is physically far away and culturally very different from that area. And it would be really different if you lived in that area and you were explaining it to your children. You might need to share more details and be a little more practical about it. But that is an example of one of the kinds of ways we approach homeschooling at this age.
That's right.
And that we really always have.
Yeah. And if we tie it a little bit, if we were to think about the curriculum a little bit, this is why we teach geography in the primary and lower elementary and continue on, because we want humans, as adults, to know where things are in the world and be able to connect the dots. Because for good, when there are hard times or happy times or whatever, we all live on the planet and we need to know where things are, and we need to be able to sort of connect the dots. Where is Ukraine? Where is Russia? Where is the United States in relation to them? And then you can add in history as well when they get older. I wouldn't really use a lot of history with the under 10. It tends to be a little abstract. And I think you should always be honest and open. And if they're not receptive to it, then just, the cup will fill as much as it wants to. But when they get older, they become much more in tune with that. And you can begin to sort of weave these together. But that's exactly why these are so critical to our learning. There's a reason we study geography, and it's not just so we can put little maps on pins on a map. It's so that we have a reference of the world and the people of the world. It's also why we study physical geography, so we can understand what is the Black Sea, what is the Mediterranean, what is the ocean, what are mountains, and where are they, and how does that influence the way the people of the world interact. And so those are in the curriculum. So when we talk about world events, we are teaching, because we're trying to draw in all of those pieces together and helping them imagine. And for our 14-year-old, the reaction was kind of like ducked behind a pillow and listened very intently, but he did not want to seem like he was listening, because that's appropriate for someone his age. For an 11-year-old, for him, he was very engaged. And I would give an analogy, and then he would want to make up his own. Oh, it's like if we did this. No, that's not good. It's like it's like this. And that's
another metaphor.
Exactly. I'm going to come up with another metaphor for this. And that's his way of processing it. And that's growth. Like, here we're having intellectual growth, and we're helping convey our worldview to our children about peace and freedom and so forth. So it's hard, but it's worth engaging with.
Yeah. So all of this kind of is leading up to one of the big points we want to make, is that we can choose to make a big part of our homeschooling adventure all about conversations that we have with our children, and just those family meetings where we come together and we talk about real and serious stuff, because we have control over that part of their education. And if our children were in a different educational system, or we had made a different choice other than homeschooling, then we wouldn't have some of that control. We would still be able to do it on weekends and in evenings, and I'm sure that we still would. But that's having kind of a control over our own children's education, and be able to make that, like, that is the core of our approach, this discussion, this family-centered approach to learning together. That is a big reason why we chose homeschooling. And it also happens to be maybe not the conversation piece, but the number one reason that people choose homeschooling is to actually have control over their own child's education, which you don't necessarily feel that you have as much of
That's
when
right.
they go to a school.
And that control can vary. It can be about flexibility of schedule. Maybe, as homeschooling schoolers, we know folks who took that opportunity to travel. They rented an RV based, or they were out of the country, especially during the pandemic when there was so much remote work became more common for some folks, and they took advantage of that. Of course, many will choose that because of religious or family values or beliefs. They want the freedom or control for that. For us, control over pedagogy, so the Montessori method, and making sure that what we thought was right about the way to teach and trying to create an educational experience for our children that match to what we know from research and science is good. Freedom from state control is a big one, like or standardized testing
I will tell you this, when I taught in the classroom, the standardized tests in the public school where I taught, it was really, really harsh. Kids were really, really stressed about it. Parents were super stressed about it. And when I saw that effect on kids that it was having on children's excitement, curiosity for learning, that the standardized tests were suppressing, the focus on the testing was suppressing that curiosity and that engagement and that lightheartedness that we find in children naturally. That is one of my primary personal reasons, one of the reasons at least that I was investigating, okay, like how can I have my children avoid that kind of high pressure and stress? And we hear about kids in our community. We live here right now in the Bay Area, and there's a lot of pressure out there for kids, especially if they're tracked, on college tracking like this. It gets very intense.
It does.
Yeah.
And not in a way that is necessarily healthy. I mean, stress and that challenge is a part of life, and children must face adversity in order to learn how to overcome it. There's another reason why you might talk about world events, but you want to do it in a way that's constructive and supportive. Another one that was from us was about preparing the kids for the modern world. We were classroom teachers, and we believe very strongly in education, but we know that the world is really changing. The kind of work that people are doing, the way people are organizing their lives, what they value, it's changing. We're seeing it change all around us in every possible way. And we felt that we wanted to make sure that our children were given an education that was reflective of that, so that they had the skill sets they needed in the 21st century, rather than maybe the skill set that once prepared them for even when we were in school and going on the standard, you're going to now go to college and beyond. Our children will likely go to college if that's what they wish, but they may actually wind up just doing boot camps and things like that in order to learn. I mean, there are so many different ways to succeed in the world, and we're all kind of coming to terms with it. It's a wonderful thing, actually. And it's so the freedom for us, the control over that, was about the ability to prepare them for this future world, and to make sure they didn't just sit in a desk all day.
Yeah. So those kind of touched on some of our personal reasons for homeschooling, as well as some of the other reasons why parents might want to have control over their children's education. But I also wanted to bring up the point that even though we as adults, we might be choosing homeschooling so that we can have more control over their education, part of the Montessori method actually, or the philosophy actually says that what we should be doing as the guide for our children is turning that control over to the child. We know from looking at the development of children and just how they learn and grow that they have to have freedom in order to develop and grow and learn in the natural way that children learn and grow and develop. So we personally really believe that learning should be child-centered. And not every homeschooler does. There's many, many different ways of homeschooling, and our personal preferred method is that we prefer to have a lot of deep conversations with our children and to learn as a family, but also we really believe that children are capable of taking initiative of their own learning. And our job is to guide them in that process, to support them. And so we're not here to say you have to go to college. We're here to say, if, here are some of the benefits. And if you want to make this your path in life, then what can we do to support you in that journey? So, we're not quite there yet. We have a 14-year-old. We're just starting to have conversations about the high school journey and what, his college age years will look like. So I'll let you know in a few years kind of how that turned out. But I know 100% that it works when they're little.
It does.
Even with little toddlers, it's not that we are giving them all the freedom in the world. If you gave children too much freedom, of course they wouldn't feel secure. They need to have boundaries. They need to know that you are there to guide them. They need to have somebody to model themselves after. So it's not that we are removing ourselves from the situation. It's the opposite. We are trying to be our best role models for them. And we're trying to give them a little bit of structure so that they can make choices within that structure.
That's right. Freedom, for either the child or the parent, it can't be absolute. We actually need limitations and guidelines in order to really achieve success. So for us, what we advocate is following pedagogy and learning science. Maria Montessori and other people over the years who have worked and studied, and they know things like there are sensitive periods for when a child is ready for this or that. And if you miss that sensitive period, there actually could be a consequence. So freedom, yes, we want to empower the child-centric, learner-centric, but we also need to know the rules. We need to know the limitations and guidelines in order to create the best learning environment. Too few rules and it's anarchy. Too many rules and it's stifling. And this is kind of what we often think of in a traditional setting. So for me, when I think about these limitations or guidelines, I'd like to think of them like rules in a game. I'm a baseball fan. Unfortunately, the season may not start soon enough because of we'll talk about that on the baseball chat time, but I'm a little upset. But I love baseball, and baseball works because of rules, right? Just like any game, you have to have rules. If it was just like, I'm gonna throw this and you hit this, and then like you could run around the bases as often as you want or in any order, it wouldn't be a challenge. It wouldn't be interesting. And actually, that's kind of the point of education too. You need to have enough rules to be able to really guide that, to help them make meaning of it. Otherwise, it's just kind of chaotic anarchy, and that's not fun or actually effective. But there is good news. Like, these rules are not unknowable. In fact, we can describe them pretty straightforward, right?
Yeah, they're basically built into the child's development.
That's exactly.
Children aren't always able to tell us what they need, but they do show us what they need. And I think a lot of what they show us is how much freedom they need and how many boundaries they need. And as parents, it can be really hard to walk that line. We might give children a little too much freedom at first, then realize, if I don't hold my toddler's hand, they're just going to be running out into the road, and we can't have that. So we've got to have some kind of limitation on safety, right? Because they're just not there in running. Their development is saying, run, 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 run away. And we're saying, okay, safe. Keep them safe. But in contrast, if you were always to hold your child's hand or always to carry them everywhere, when what they really wanted was to be walking, this is an example with really little ones, but it applies to the older ones as well. If you always did that, then your children wouldn't have the opportunity to express their independence and to have the freedom to learn what they need to know about the world.
Mm-hmm.
And they just have that drive right within themselves. And that's probably the magic of Montessori that just really captivates me the most, is getting into the heart of it. Like, there are things about the child that we cannot see. We can just suspect are there. And so we can get into a lot of stuff, and we're not going to have time for that today. You're welcome to take one of the courses if you want to go down that path with
Come back
me
to the next live.
Yes. So yes, observation, documentation, there's a lot of things that we can do as parents in order to figure out the mystery of what's going on with our children's development and how much to give them or how restricted we should be in certain aspects. But I did find this quote from Maria Montessori I want to leave you with, and you can tell me your thoughts in the comments. I love hearing that. Those of you who take courses from me know I love reading what you have to say. You are brilliant, brilliant people, and I mean that genuinely. So Maria Montessori says, young people must have enough freedom to allow them to act on individual initiative. But in order that individual action should be free and useful at the same time, it must be restricted within certain limits and rules that give the necessary guidance. And I'll read that one more time so you can hear it and tell me your thoughts. Young people must have enough freedom to allow them to act on individual initiative. But in order that individual action should be free and useful at the same time, it must be restricted with certain limits and rules that give the necessary guidance. It's our job as parents to give that guidance. If we were classroom teachers, we would be giving that guidance as well. And I still believe that even as a classroom teacher.
And I think it's curious to see what pops up. But for me, what I love about this quote is that when she talks about, what are the limitations, the rules, whatever, she's talking about them as having a purpose. Mm-hmm. And that purpose is guidance. That purpose is to help create a positive, effective experience. It's not to control in that kind of crude way. It's not to limit in sort of the constricting way. It's to guide. And that's why we want to have some parameters on how our approach to teaching. For us, it's the Montessori approach, it's the curriculum, the Montessori curriculum and the methodology. And for others, there are many other good ways to do it. But the goal is, with our control, whatever we're trying to control with our environment, by deciding to homeschool, we want to never forget that the child also must have a voice, but that as the teacher and the parent, that voice needs guidance.
Yeah. So some of the guidance that I had in mind, just to kind of have us thinking about Montessori, is we can have control over the environment, and we can give guidance within the environmental constraints. Kind of, the environment itself can be a rule, not just the rules themselves of, getting one workout at a time or whatever, but like you're creating boundaries by the way you create your environment. And there's a phenomenon in Montessori classrooms that applies to home design as well. If you have a child that is running through the room and it's disruptive, there are things you can do in your environment to help curb the running, so you can tilt a shelf, or you can create a little reading corner to help bring some calmness. You can repaint your walls a more calming color. You can hang artwork up to make it more peaceful. You can put a peace table in the room. There's just so much we can do to exert our control over the environment while still allowing the child a lot of freedom and choice in there. And we also can choose our pedagogy. We choose Montessori to be the core method that we use as homeschooling parents, but it's obviously not the only method that has influenced us.
For sure. Parenting. I wasn't a Montessorian really at all until we became, when we got married is when I learned about it. But, my background was constructivism or Dewey. So they're very, very aligned. There was no real daylight between them, but because the point of being that Montessori is an excellent way of approaching it. It's not the only way, and it fits so well with other approaches and philosophies, as long as we always remember to be child-centric. You can't really go wrong.
Yeah, so there are lots of rules just built in. The materials themselves have boundaries, rug spaces have boundaries, the environment does, in the way that you interact with your child, and the habits that you form can kind of be a form of a rule. Like our kids know that when it's like family meeting time and we say things like, we probably use a certain phrase. We say, "Hey kids, come into the living room. We have something important to tell you." They know, like, I know it sounds simple, but like that's their cue. That's their like, oh, this is a non-negotiable time.
They'll sometimes come out and say, "All right, just tell me outright, how bad is it?"
I know.
we're like, no. Like,
It's not always bad. Like
we just want to
sometimes
talk.
we just want to set the agenda for the day, or we
That's
want
right.
to say we wanted to know which park you wanted to go to. Or, yeah, I know, but they know, but that is a boundary. That's a rule, and then we usually insert choices within that. You have to come to the family meeting. It's not a negotiation that you just choose not to come. You can't choose not to come, but you can. We give them choices within it. So we'll say, what do you want to talk about, this or that first? Or, we often interrupt what we're saying to ask for feedback and to get their ideas. And in fact, I think I was wrong when I said how we open the conversation with a story. I think you opened the conversation by saying, hey, to our oldest, I know you're in a news class. There's some big world events happening right now. Was there anything that you had a question about, or anything that you wanted clarification on? And that's kind of how we started. And he didn't. He said,
and it's kind of typical teenage third plane way.
Yeah, he actually said, I wasn't paying attention during class.
Doing something else. His voice really is that deep. But he didn't engage in the same way that his younger brother did, because they're different planes. They're different kids, and they're at different stages of their development. One's third plane, one is in the second plane, and there is a distinct difference between them. But he was engaged in other ways, whether it was his attention, by his sitting, his eye contact. And that goes to the sense of like, you have to be here. I don't expect you to speak, but I do expect you to participate in the way that you can. And so we were happy to have that conversation, even a very difficult conversation.
Yeah. All right. We've got about 5 minutes left. Do you guys have any questions about anything?
Great comments too.
Yeah, I can read some of those. If you have any questions about anything that we've talked about, or if we can give you any quick answers to anything, we've got about 5 minutes left for our time frame for this live broadcast.
Yeah.
So type those in the comments if you have any. Do you want to read some of these out loud?
Lisa made the comment here about the intrinsic motivation, about the freedom within limits, and that how that can allow them to learn the gain intrinsic motivation, which is absolutely the key. When we become intrinsically motivated, things resonate, they become meaningful to us. It's the key to the unlocking, and we've talked about this before, and we can do a whole live on the difference in intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation, and why extrinsic motivation is not why it's often used so much in school, but it's always so ineffective, and not just school, but in all of life. But you're absolutely right. I mean, this is why you want to give somebody that moral compass, so that they can resonate with the world around them and feel good about their contribution to it.
All right, Amanda asked a question. She says, so many wonderful things to learn from Maria Montessori. Absolutely. She says, if you recommend only 3 books to read, which would you recommend? I recommend The Absorbent Mind, possibly first. Okay, so, and to give you an insight into Maria Montessori's books, they can be very dense. David and I have had many long conversations reading Maria Montessori's books as well. Some fun. So our books tend to be very underlined and highlighted and notes taken. So don't feel like you have to read the thing all the way through. That would probably be my first and best pick for Maria Montessori's work itself, just because the last chapter is absolutely incredible. I read it out loud to our Constellation members, and so those of you who are here in Constellation, you know how amazing it is. So so feel free to skip right to that last chapter if you want. I know that's a funny suggestion. And expect from The Absorbent Mind that this is it's not necessarily up to date. She wrote it back in 1949 or 52. Yeah. She died in 52. So it was published right before her death. Could be 49, something like that. So she had just lived through World War II. And a lot of the book is about creating peace. So it's a wonderful way to get to know Maria Montessori's thoughts on peace and love, and to just see her absolute respect for the child. And she has great tips in there too.
Yeah.
But it's not going to be a how-to of how to have a Montessori classroom or how to be a Montessori parent. It's not a manual. There is no manual that is like public like that. Maria Montessori actually taught in many ways the way I'm trying to teach myself online, by addressing certain topics that seemed really relevant for her time period and relevant to children, and just discussing them, bringing out research, researching them herself. And then she would just give lecture after lecture after lecture after lecture. And so when you look online and you see, okay, I could buy a big set of Montessori albums to tell me what to do. Yes, you can. But the real crux of Montessori is like, that is the way she taught. And that is the real Montessori approach, is just to really dig into the philosophy, to get deep into the child's psyche. And so you'll see that in The Absorbent Mind. And my second favorite is The Secret of Childhood. That one was written a lot earlier. The Absorbent Mind was kind of like the crowning achievement of her life, where you really see everything come together for her. Eastern philosophy and Western philosophy, her Catholicism just merged together in The Absorbent Mind. Not so for the earlier books. In The Secret of Childhood, that is a very raw and younger Maria Montessori. She's very passionate in that. She's not super kind to parents in that, because she's just all child advocate throughout the whole thing. And so that one, read for fun. And also has just some brilliant passages in it, just so much insightfulness. And the discoveries of the child is kind of more, it's more of a book about the method itself as she was applying it. So you get little glimpses of stories that she told the children, or jokes, little jokes that she had with the children, or, she was a very playful person. I know she looks very severe.
Yeah. You see those photos from the old timey photos, and very, the Victorian or garb and stuff. But you read those passages, and she comes alive, and it's obvious why she was a wonderful teacher. She had such amazing love for children and for learning. And so it's wonderful. Like, there's a lot of good information, but it just fills you with a sense of hopefulness.
Yeah. Anyway, love it. So a couple more questions. Let's see. Lisa says, regarding deciding going into homeschooling, how do you approach socialization for your children? We live far away from family, and most of our friends have kids in traditional schooling. So we could do a whole episode on that one too, but we're not going to. But I'm going to give you the short answer. Right now. I'm going to give you the short answer. Okay. Short answer is, you're going to use your existing community. Your kids don't have to be in school in order to socialize with the kids who are in school. So you're looking at after school programs. You're looking at driving your kids to classes. If you live too far, don't feel afraid to drive them somewhere to go and meet up with other homeschool groups if you can. And if you can't, you need to be using your existing community. People of all ages. Children learn so much about how to be social creatures, and how to be polite, and how to interact with others on that multi-age level. So those are the little tips I'll give you to send you in that direction.
I was in 4-H. I went to public school, but I was also in 4-H. I don't know if any of you know what that is. When I was a kid, 10 to 18, actually, I loved it. I would definitely do something like that if I lived in an area that had a 4-H club or scouting. Our kids are in something called Forest School, which is a 1-day-a-week program where they go out and with other kids their age who are also homeschooled. So there's a myth that homeschooling is all insular, and the reality is that it's not. When the pandemic shut down a lot, it was really hard on homeschoolers too, because we rely so much on the broader community to help give our children a rounded educational experience. Here we're lucky to live in a city, so that's large enough to have community centers and theaters and things like that we could put the children in. But even, like I said, growing up in a really rural area, there are organizations and things that you can find, and I would encourage you to see what might fit, just to kind of give them that socialization, because we need to give them a place to practice the things that they're learning, which is the communication and the interaction.
So for a large part of our homeschooling, our routine was in the mornings, in the early afternoons, basically the school day. We would stay at home. We would get out and go to the park or whatever earlier in the morning. When they were younger, I did that. But we kind of evolved into this habit of we just kind of sleep in, make a long breakfast, read stories on the couch, relax, do some lessons, and kind of have our school day together. And in the afternoons, as soon as other kids would be out and ready to play on the playgrounds, we would also be out there and going to playgrounds and interacting with the community. And our kids found lots of little classes that they could take, and they were almost exclusively after school classes. Okay.
Yeah, mixing with kids in all different kinds of educational. Some were homeschool, some were public school, private school, whatever. And that socialization is critical.
Yeah.
Last
question.
Last one, unfortunately, we've run a little long, but do you want to tackle that?
Yeah, Nicole. So she says, I've come in late, but how do you juggle two different planes? I have a 3-year-old who only wants to do what our 6-year-old is doing.
Exactly.
Yes. Okay. And yes, we identify with that. Our 11-year-old still wants to be what the 14-year-old is doing. I mean, that is not going to stop. It's just sibling dynamics. So lean into that because it's going to be with you. I will tell you that, I say when they were toddlers, we didn't get so much into the weeds about politics and things. And that's true to an extent. But when you have one child who is older and one child is younger, we didn't exclude the younger from anything. We always included him in all of the conversations and in the lessons that I was giving the older one. So there are some things that you can do if your younger one is constantly bothering the older one, or vice versa. We talk about this in Constellation a lot. Just about every session this comes up. So don't feel like you're alone, Nicole. But yeah, you can have 2 separate desks. You can have 2 separate work rugs. You can set a time. I know a mom that set a timer and said, I'm going to give 20 minutes to you and 20 minutes to you. And that's how it's going to be for this hour. So, there are little boundaries that you can kind of put around your environment and in your interactions with them to help that a little bit. But in general, we played the together game. We decided to learn as a family, and that meant that our younger one was getting some elementary lessons before he was ready for them. And it worked out okay.
So you might, off the top of my head, you might have 2 movable alphabets, one for the 6-year-old and one for the 3-year-old. And you're not going to expect the same thing from the 3-year-old, but you're going to allow the 3-year-old to be involved and feel a part of that. And again, the lessons aren't going to have the same impact, but it's going to be it's going to be a richer experience. And it really, at least for us, what's valuable about homeschooling is that it's really family centric, and it's just a nice way to kind of bring that together. And so we've consistently tried to do that whenever we give lessons. Whenever I teach, we read Animal Farm a few months ago, and for our 11-year-old, it was scarier than it was for the 14-year-old, but we didn't exclude him. And because he would have been resentful, and frankly, he rose to the challenge, and it really made an impact. And we have been talking about those lessons even in context of world events. So don't be afraid to push the younger one a little bit, like have that second movable alphabet or whatever.
This is an option.
Yeah. And vice versa. As you give lessons to the 3-year-old, thinking about what might engage the 6-year-old so that you can be together on that.
Okay. Thank you so much for coming. We really appreciated getting to spend this time with you. Yeah, it was nice for us too.
Yeah, we look forward to doing this. I think we're going to try and do this every couple of weeks.
Yeah, we're going to do it every other week.
Yeah, so hopefully we'll see how it goes. And let us know in the comments if you have any questions or feedback on this. We want to get better with the YouTube Live. We usually use another platform, so new for us. But thank you so much for joining us, and see you soon.
Yep. You can find us at childoftheredwoods.com. And if you want to submit any topic or
sure, you can email us at hello@childoftheredwoods.
hello@childoftheredwoods. Okay. All right. Take care, friends. Have a beautiful day.
Bye.